Hi, I'm Dave Casey, founder of the Innovation Leaders Club. In this video, we're going to look at why traditional development approach is inadequate when it comes to strategic innovation. When we're talking about strategic innovation, we're talking about higher level of innovation compared to tactical innovation. I would say tactical innovation is really an extension. So let's say on a product, you're adding a color, or on a software, you're adding a function. And strategic innovation often reside, if it's for product, it will ultimately be a new platform, or if it's a service, it's really like a different service than what you're offering right now. So one thing that is interesting about planning, it's kind of forecasting what would happen. So you plan based on what you know. But the issue with planning is, like I just mentioned, you plan based on what is known. Strategic innovation has a lot of unknowns. So as soon as you start developing, you acquire new knowledge. And in some cases, there's assumption that you made that they ultimately ended up wrong. So this is why when we develop innovation, especially at the strategic level, we try to plan at kind of a simpler level and be flexible and agile as we're moving along to adapt that plan. So that video will target this subject. So let's have a look.
This video from the Innovation Leaders Club will explain why the traditional development approach is inadequate for strategic innovation. At the beginning of an innovation project, there are many unknowns, so everything is guesses or hypotheses. The traditional development approach usually requires market research and then a business case to justify any investment or development effort. Fortunately, the business case is often a static document, while the market keeps evolving from when the market study is completed until the innovation is launched. Learn how to proceed by using the lean startup approach. We have developed a 60-page visual guidebook on how to develop an innovation strategy. It is a fully illustrated step-by-step guide to building the foundation of an innovation system. Click the link in the description below to download it for free. Traditionally, managing businesses involves annual plans, annual objectives, and project plans. When something goes wrong, it's easy to blame it on a faulty plan or poor execution. When presenting an innovation project, the typical approach is the traditional waterfall model. The first step is the market research, where the market and customers are studied to identify needs. Second, a business plan is built. This is to justify the project while projecting a financial forecast and returns. Lastly, if everything has been accepted, the plan is executed as planned. So what's wrong with this approach? With this typical approach, key assumptions and the hypothesis of the business plan are too uncertain. There's no iteration in the process. As the plan proceeds to execution, things are undoubtedly learned, and there are too many possible outcomes. There is no certainty when looking towards the future. When the business plan is built up front, there is a need to eventually validate the hypotheses, even with market research. If you wait until the plan's execution to verify what comes next, the whole business plan remains one big, wild guess. Most importantly, in this waterfall approach, the business plan is a dead document, a milestone. It will not be revised or updated along the way. It might be consulted to assess the performance a year from now, but rarely is it a living document. Steve Blank is an American serial entrepreneur, educator, author, and speaker. He lives in California, where he became a billionaire. He is known to have launched the lean startup approach movement. One of his famous quotes is, "No business plan survives first contact with customers." The point is, how can you ask a plan when there is too many unknowns in an unpredictable environment?
It is not because you want to be agile and flexible that you will not necessarily use a process. So the lean startup process is really a process of kind of making formal changes to innovation development. So you're making a process to formalize changing among the team. And that works really well. And it was really well documented through Eric Ries, through one of his famous book called The Lean Startup, coming from, I would say, Steve Blank's philosophy that we've seen earlier. So let's have a look. What is the Lean Startup approach?
Rather than using the conventional waterfall approach, it's best to start with small-scale market research, a business plan, and an execution. This is also called the Lean Startup approach, and it doesn't take as much time as the waterfall approach. It can lead to learnings that will allow innovators and companies to adapt, adjust, and perfect the plan. When looking at the life of innovation, making smaller steps to gain insight is far more ideal than building a voluminous business case. The perfect business plan will emerge from small iterations, and the product or innovation grows from that. It also allows you to learn more and learn quickly. For more details on the fallacy of the perfect business plan, this article written by Steve Blank and published in the Harvard Business Review explains why a perfect business plan emerges from small iterations. To dive deeper into the subject, you might want to read the book The Lean Startup, written by Eric Ries, which describes the whole process in detail. When you have an idea of a value proposal, it's all assumptions. A pivot is a radical change of direction on one or more components of the business model. It becomes necessary when tests reveal that assumptions do not match reality. When testing is late or when anything goes wrong, it can be perceived as a failure. Consider this in a situation when you're working on the design and need to justify changes with upper management. As time goes on, designers may become less willing to make modifications to their innovations. Some club members even say, over time, the developer may fall in love with their innovation and be unwilling to change anything. To summarize, testing early is always positive because it validates assumptions with reality. Then you learn and get to make something worthwhile out of it, whether it is to persevere if the results are positive or to pivot when the results are not as expected. Knowing when to persevere or pivot is a vital part of the validated learning process.
Next, we'll be looking at learnings. Like I mentioned in the introduction, strategic innovation comes with a lot of unknowns. And as you move along, you validate or you ended up having some of the unknowns that ended up not necessarily the way you want. In some cases, it does. So what we're talking about in this case, sometimes people refer to assumption. So we validate assumption in some cases, and assumptions are either right or wrong, but ultimately we learn. So in innovation management, especially for strategic innovation, we have to find ways to get those learning as soon as possible and to learn really cheap and learn fast. So I recall one of the CEO of a company that we did a postmortem of innovation that really failed and was really costly for the organization. And the CEO wanted to do this postmortem because he said, okay, it did cost a lot of money to us, but I hope we're going to have a lot of learnings out of that. And some innovators ended up using those learnings to do things better. So we have to go get those learnings really early stage in order to end up with a successful, cost-effective innovation project. So let's have a look at what are those learnings.
Keeping in mind that you need to test early, how would you revisit the business plan preparation? Yes, the learning techniques should be identified first, before starting the product development process. To identify your learning techniques, you can use the validation board, which helps you identify your riskiest assumption and plan how you will validate it. Another interesting tool is the Value Proposition Canvas from Strategizer. Use the link below to watch their YouTube video on how to use it. Identifying the learning techniques first enables you to start with the right questions and problems. Rather than taking multiple stops to get to your destination, you can get a lot of your answers early. A good example of a learning process include these 4 learning techniques: usage and attitude, idea selection, co-creation, and home testing. To start with, usage and attitude involves getting to know the customers, their habits, preferences, annoyances, and needs. The second step, idea selection, tests preliminary ideas to determine the proper value of the idea as the value proposition stage. In the food and beverage industry, it is easier to visualize this with the help of a good graphic artist, or just a hands-on in the kitchen for prototyping. Next, co-creation goes into more detail of the concept through a recipe, software, service, or other avenue. At the end of the front end of innovation is home testing, which is more of a fine-tuning. It begins by sending out prototypes. After converging a few of your ideas, sending out the prototypes helps in confirming whether or not you have the right concept. Bathroom products, for example, involve fine-tuning the installation process. To summarize, in the beginning, the business model is a collection of assumptions or hypotheses. The top assumptions are selected to be tested first, for instance, the riskiest assumptions. After that, these hypotheses are tested in an experiment in a business setting involving measurements such as interviews, surveys, and other tools for market measurement. It is the start of the learning process using minimum viable products. The findings of this testing are called validated learning. Established organizations are still learning about the lean startup approach. General Electric mandated Eric Ries to develop their version of the lean startup approach named FastWorks, pictured here. Notice that FastWorks starts at the top with customer need and proceeds with potential solutions to get ahead in problem solving. Based on the preliminary projected solutions, GE's innovators identified its leap of faith assumptions. The first thing they do is list the riskiest assumption to validate whether or not the solution is viable. After that, they test their assumptions by building minimal viable products, commonly called MVPs. MVPs are described as the cheapest and simplest way to test the assumptions with a potential client in order to gain knowledge. This learning is defined by learning metrics, which serves to test the MVP. Once the test result is available, the team decides whether to preserve the solution or pivot to a modified solution.
I hope you like this video. Being capable of being agile into the innovation development is key in order to get to the strategic innovation level if you want to develop new platforms, new services, and ultimately to increase the innovation level. Because we're trying to get learnings as early as possible and also pivot from those learnings in order to get a better innovation to the market and ultimately to your customers. So get accustomed to those practices and be able to communicate that we have to make changes, which we call pivot, and which is, it is not a failure, but it is a learning that we're going to apply in order to do things better. And that's what makes things very positive and makes things to move forward into the right direction.
If you haven't already done so, you can get your hands on our popular 60-page visual guidebook for free. Click the link in the description below. Don't hesitate to watch the next video to learn even more about innovation management practices.